With all the success you've had, do you still face, are you currently facing any fears, or are there fears about the horizon?
I have to give you amazing props. You're such a curious person about the people that you talk to. I love it. I love it, man.
Thank you.
The answer is, thank you. Are you kidding me? I've been on a ton of podcasts and people just same questions.
Welcome to Idea Climbing Radio. Today, we're talking about how to present your big idea to the world. And my guest is Diane DiResta, a certified speaking professional who is the founder and CEO of DiResta Communications, a New York consultancy serving business leaders who deliver high-stakes presentations, whether one-to-one, on stage, or from a virtual forum. She's the author of Knockout Presentations, How to Deliver Your Message with Power, Punch, and Pizzazz, and has spoken on 4 continents. She's also the past president of the New York City chapter of National Speakers Association and has been featured on CNN, quoted in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. And there we go. Thank you for being here, Diane. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And I'd love to, before we get into sharing your big idea with the world, as far as it's one thing to become the level of speaker that you're at, but to actually be able to train other people to speak well and give presentations well, how did that career path happen for you? Were you always just a natural and then you honed it and you taught people? Did you have to learn it along the way? What's the story there?
Well, I learned it along the way, but as I look back, it's interesting. As a young person, I used to correct people's speech, which didn't make me too popular, but I had an ear for language, and I became a speech pathologist. That was my first career. I had a master's from Columbia. And so I worked with children originally in the New York City schools who had speech and language disorders and delays. And from there, I made a career change and I started doing stand-up training for this public speaking company that worked with corporations. So that was a real grounding in this kind of a skill. And then from there, I went to Solomon Brothers doing management training. And then I was an assistant vice president at Drexel Burnham, and I recruited trading people for the trading floor. They were MBAs. And after that, I left because I liked the work, but I didn't like the culture of Wall Street. So I started freelancing, thinking, all right, I'm going to get a full-time training manager job. And meanwhile, I was doing a little thing here, a little thing there on my own. 2 years later, I got an offer with an increase in salary, and I turned it down because I liked what I was doing. So it was kind of a bootstrap thing. One thing led to another. I did not know what I was doing, but that's how I started my business. So that is how I got started. So was it natural? I didn't have a fear of speaking so much, but I certainly needed to learn a lot. Like when I took a course in college, the required public speaking course, I got a B in the course. So I was not a standout. I was a little nervous, but not terrified. But I got much better as I learned the skills. And that's the message for people who have a big idea and they want to get it out, but they're afraid. I would just say this: get over yourself. If you're being that nervous, you're being self-centered, and it's all about me, myself, and I. Oh, I hope I don't trip. What if I get brain fog? Forget it. It's not about you. It's about them, the audience. So when you change your perspective and you start focusing on how can I serve them? How can I make this clear? How can I make them feel comfortable? You start to lose your self-consciousness. Because if you're nervous, I know for a fact your mind is in the future. You're imagining everything that can go wrong. But what you want to do is bring yourself back into your body, into the present moment. Well, how do you do that? Through the breath. So, of all the techniques, and I have a whole chapter in my book, Knockout Presentations, called Fear Fixes. The number one, I would say, is breathing. A lot of times when we get nervous, we hold our breath, we tense up. So it's getting into that rhythm, breathing, and forgetting about yourself. Get involved in your message. Focus on the audience. Come from a place of serving, and you won't be as nervous.
Well, you spoke about it,
and I'm sticking to it.
Yes. You got to get over yourself, get out of your own head. It sounds like for people listening or watching that maybe don't have a lot of, let's just say don't have a lot of experience with public speaking, it is kind of scary. Can you share a couple stories about what were some of your first speaking gigs and how did you grow as a speaker from those first speaking gigs, free or otherwise?
All right. So my very first one that I remember was first grade on the stage for the Christmas assembly. And I remember my lines, which were wrapped in ribbons, tied in bows. And that's all I remember about that. But when I did my first introduction speech for my college class, I got more nervous as I was speaking, and I'd start talking faster and faster. And I was thinking, well, maybe nobody will notice. And then as I was winding up, I heard this stage whisper in the back of the room. And what they said was, look, her shoulders are shaking. Literally, I was shaking
Oh,
as I was sitting there in front of the room. And yeah, I think I wanted to leave and never come back, but I did. And as I told you, I got a B in the course. It wasn't an A. So the reason I tell that story is gifted speakers are born, but effective speakers are made. And even the gifted, like a Martin Luther King, studied for years and they honed their skill and their craft. So it's something that is learned. Some people are better at it than others, but I really believe anybody can be an effective speaker. And so, I've had good times and I've had bad times presenting where
mhm.
the audience isn't relating, and then you learn how to engage an audience. I think one of the mistakes people make is they turn into talking heads, and nobody likes that. So, when in doubt, turn it back on the audience, get them talking, get them involved, get them moving. Even moving the body is really helpful, not only for you as the speaker, but also for the audience.
So post college speaking, as your career is growing, what did you do to hone your skills? I mean, did you have a mentor? Did you take classes? What kind of practices did you take put into your speaking after college?
All of the above. So I started freelancing. So I would go to these groups and or companies, and I would learn their programs and I would get better and better. They'd have some training that went along with it, so you would learn how to do that. I was involved at the time, it was called American Society for Training and Development, so I'd learn training skills. And I also joined the National Speakers Association, and that was all about the business of speaking. So I would meet the top of the top speakers out
Mhm.
there, and I would watch them on the stage. I would talk to them. I would take classes. Yes, I did have coaches. Sometimes it was just storytelling. Here are my stories. They would tweak them and make them better. And Toastmasters. I didn't stay very long, but I did go to Toastmasters a
Mhm.
couple of times. And so it all helps. It all works together.
You mentioned storytelling, and I know that's a big part of, well, from what I've heard, that's a big part of effective speaking is engaging the audience with stories. Can you give some advice around storytelling? What have you learned?
That adults are like children in big bodies. We love stories. Think of Once Upon a Time. So when you can begin with a story, it's great because when you have an audience, they're guarded. They're feeling a little nervous or tense just the way you are. And when you begin with a story, what happens is the guard drops. It's like, and they're involved, they're engaged before they even know it. So that's one of the things. Start early with a story. It's
Mhm.
also a good idea to end with a story if you can, because people remember the last thing they hear. And stories are great for any kind of conflict, any difficult times, any difficult messaging. Give it in the form of a story so that people can go on that journey and start to relate. The best stories or the best storytellers create a scenario where you start to see yourself. So instead of
Mm.
telling somebody something, you tell a story and they start to recognize themselves. And it has such emotional impact. And that's when people get on their feet and they're giving you a standing ovation. That's when people sometimes are moved to tears because they see themselves in those stories.
How do you do that? That seems so personal. I mean, how do you get people to see themselves in your stories from the stage?
By making them universal, so you can be telling something that happened to you, but if it has a universal theme, like we've all had times when we failed. We've all had times when we had a great challenge that we finally overcame. So when you have those universal themes, people will see themselves in your story.
Okay, so once you get storytelling, you get their attention. engaging the audience. You said even if they move their body a little bit, what else, could you unpack that a little bit more? Because I know I've personally seen speakers, even if they were great, the audience was just there for 45 to 55 minutes. What do you do to engage an audience? Actively engage an audience is a better question.
They're not just there, they're here. And that's the worst, when they're on their phones. Again, storytelling, metaphors, analogies, movement, and change. You need to be doing things frequently that are different. In other words, you don't want to be talking head. So at one point, you may ask them to raise their hands. You may ask them to turn to the person next to them and share an idea. Like, for instance, if this were a workshop, I'd say, all right, turn to the person next to you and share, what is your one big idea? Right? So now you've got a buzz in the room. It's amazing the energy that happens when you do something like that. Sometimes people think because they're keynoting and they have this huge audience, they can't do interaction. Yes, you can. That's one of the ways you can do it. You can do the hand raising. You can also create polls on a slide. People love that, to take your phone and vote, and then showing the results. So those are some things. Standing, I'll give you some very small examples. Let's say I'm talking about, what do I do with my hands? Because that's a frequent question in speaking. So instead of telling them, I'll ask them to stand and I'll say, put your hands by your side. Now put your hands in front, and now put your hands up over here, up. And then I'll do it again. Let's do it one more time. And now I'd like you to look at your colleagues as they do it. Position 1, position 2, position 3. Which one do you think was most powerful? And that's how we get to, you want your power spaces from your waist to your face. You want your hands above the waist. So that's a more interactive, engaging way than to just tell them the answer, and getting them off their feet. Again, because what's the saying? The brain can absorb only as much as the seat can endure. So movement is a good thing. So let them do that.
Well, we've been talking about once you get on stage, which has been great. As far as sharing your big idea with the world, I would imagining that's going to start a long time, or at least a good length of time before you get on stage. Could you unpack that a little bit? I have this big idea. I know I want to share it. I'm not a professional speaker or yet, whatever it might be. What's the starting point of sharing your big idea with the world? What do you have to do for yourself before you put it out there?
You have to be clear. So clarity is the first thing. And if you can get it into one single sentence, that's probably going to be clear. And then I would test it. I would say, here's my idea. And if people are confused, they're asking a lot of questions, and it's not clear enough. Once you have that clarity, then it's all in the preparation. And I always say that it's 90% preparation and 10% delivery. So a lot of it is like what you do in the green room and the testing. It's all the back office things before you can deliver the shining diamond of a message. So it's getting ready to do that, practicing it, timing it, rehearsing it out loud, and then you're ready. And here's what I tell people: start small and try low risk audiences. Do not go out your first or second time with an important audience that could hire you or that could make an impact. Start with things that don't matter. Maybe start with student groups if that's not your market. Start with a church group if that's not your market, and work up from there. Like next month, I'm going to be doing something in the New York Public Library with a friend of mine. They're not typically my market, but it is a good way to get more exposure. It's also a good way to test new material. So as you're testing, as you're getting your speaking legs, try different works, or I should say different audiences or groups that are not high risk. So that would be the first starting point. Then get some training too. Don't just go out there cold unless you're, real natural. At the very least, you can join Toastmasters. Toastmasters is a global organization for public speaking. People from all walks of life, from homemakers to CEOs, will join it. Some groups are big, some are large, and you meet a couple of times a month. You practice giving speeches and you get feedback. So you get feedback from the audience, you get feedback from the person who counts the ums, and it really is a good confidence boost. And then you'll get a sense of how's my big idea coming. And then you'll know when you're ready to take it out to the world. And that's where you come in with your podcast or with
Mhm.
YouTube or, you know, getting on stages and then getting on bigger stages. And that can be through, you know, referrals or a speakers bureau if you're a seasoned speaker. So there are lots of ways to do that.
How do you get your first gigs if you're just practicing and getting started? I mean, is it cold calling? Is it networking? What did you do, and what would you suggest other people do if they're saying, "Well, I don't even know where to go"?
What I did is I signed on with a company that hired subcontractors. So
Mhm.
what you were doing, it was like a training company. You were doing their programs. So you were getting paid to speak, but it was their material. So that's an easier way to get started because they've got the audience, they've got the booking, they've got the material. You come in and you do the speaking facilitation. So that's one way. Another way is to start speaking at local groups, Rotary clubs, uh,
Mm.
uh, New York, the Bar Association, different church groups, wherever you can be visible, because then there's somebody in the audience who might see you and say, "Oh, do you speak at this kind of a group, a PTA meeting?" Wherever you can get out there. So the advice that people will give you, professional speakers, is speak as often and everywhere you can when you're
Mhm.
first getting started, because you need the experience, you need the exposure, you need the practice and you need to make contacts. And so any networking group, volunteer. There's so many groups that want speakers and they don't have a budget. So
Mhm.
it's a great opportunity to go out there and say, you know, I'd like to speak. Maybe it's 15, 20 minutes, maybe it's 30 minutes, but just keep doing it. And then through the networking, you meet people. And even through social media or LinkedIn, look for meeting planners, event planners, or even other speakers and ask them, where did you get your speaking engagement? Do you think they would want someone else? Because here's the good news. If you're looking for paid speaking engagements, they can't bring the same person back every time. They've got to have a new
Mm-mm.
program,
Uh-uh.
right? So wouldn't it be great to be referred by somebody who was just one of their speakers? So that's another way that you can do it.
I'm really big as far as in business in general, networking. I think it makes the world go round. It's how you start a business. For starting a speaking career, you mentioned it, but could you dig a little bit deeper as far as do's and don'ts of networking? So because some people think, oh, I don't want to come across too pushy, but at the same time, I have to, in air quotes, sell myself. What networking tips would you have for aspiring speakers that want to share their big idea with the world?
Number one, you just hit it on the head. Don't sell. You're there to build relationships. Networking is relationship building because what happens over time is people know and trust you, and then something happens and you get referred. I would say two things: build relationships without expecting anything in return. Give, be of value, build a relationship. And then the other part of that is be visible and let people know what you do. And that's where the elevator pitch comes in. If you can clearly, compellingly talk about what you do and your big idea and
Mm-hmm.
you're excited about it, then people start to remember that. So when you speak about your topic or your big idea, is it memorable? Is it something that gets people interested? And one of the things that I saw, there's a networking group called BNI,
Mm-hmm.
and I think they're worldwide. Anyway, what they do is they have you give your elevator pitch and then the group has to say the mantra after. So if I say blah 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 blah, how to give a knockout presentation, the group will all say how to give a knockout presentation. So you start to learn the key words or the mantras of everybody. And also storytelling comes in here. If you can tell a story through your pitch, and by pitch, I don't mean you're selling, but when you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about yourself, then people can do it. So I'll give you an example. I think this was from a network. Yeah, it was a networking group. There was somebody who sold flooring. And he would start by saying, you know, when your neighbor gets cabinets in their kitchen and they're so happy and they're all new looking, and then their floor needs work. Well, I'm that person. I come in and I establish the floors and I do linoleum, blah, blah, blah. Well, don't you know that was said enough time that one time somebody's friend got these new cabinets. She said, yeah, but what about your flooring? And this guy came in and he got the business because they had been trained. So I would say train people to be your sales force. That's really what networking is. The mistake people make in networking is they think the immediate group is are the people that you're going to sell to. No, do not sell to them, but make them your sales force, make them your ambassadors so that when they see somebody, they'll say, oh, I know this person. Oh, Mark Carter, he's this great podcaster. Oh, you've got to call him and be on his show or hire him. So that's how it works. Relationship building and good presentation. Have a
I
good
love
elevator.
I love that you used the word ambassador. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because it's not, you didn't say salesperson, you didn't say just beat people to death with your elevator speech, but actually creating ambassadors. How do you do that?
The way that I just talked about, by building relationships where people like you, they trust you, and they know what you do. And they're clear enough that they can talk about it. In fact, what's interesting is sometimes I'll be in a network and we're in the same group, small group, and I'll say, well, instead of introducing myself, Mark, would you tell people who I am? I just want to make sure that what I say in every meeting is coming across. And it's interesting. Either they get it or they don't. And so if they can repeat what you would normally say, you know that you've got it. And the other thing is you need to let people know what you're looking for. So it's not, oh, do you need a coach? No, that's selling to them. It's like, one of the things that I look for are in my coaching business is our clients who are of this age and work in this kind of industry. Oh, okay. So now I know her target market. So when they meet those kinds of people, and another thing, if you ever hear them say, and this will be for us, if you ever hear someone say, my team lacks gravitas, they're not polished. They really don't have executive presence. That is a signal to call Diane. So they start to hear key words, and then they're in a meeting, they're in their office, and they hear a manager or VP say something like, oh, I know somebody who can help you with that. That's what I mean by ambassador. But they've got to be trained to do that. And that's from the frequency, the consistency of going to meetings, showing up, being helpful. So part of that building of the relationship is bringing resources or value to people. It may be, I saw this article, or, you work with this kind of person. Do you know there's an organization like that? So for example, I was in a group, there was a woman attorney, and she said she works with media and entertainment and sports. And I said, did you know there's a group called Women in Toys? She said, no. I said, yeah, it's an association. They're people who are people in the toy manufacturing business, designers, etc. She said, oh, I think that would be good for me to network. And I said, fine, I'll find the website for you. And here it is. And by the way, here's the person that used to be the president. Here's her email. That's relationship building. And then there's that level of reciprocity. When you do something for someone, they want to pay it forward. So those are all the tips. Do not sell. Be in it for the long term. Show up, be of value, build a relationship, and then train people in what you do.
Well, once you start doing that and making a name for yourself, I mean, you wrote knockout presentations. I know there's a lot of people out there, entrepreneurs, entrepreneurial, up and coming thought leaders, and everyone, it seems like depending on who you talk to, everyone wants to write a book. How do you know when and if you're ready to write a book?
I can't answer that. I had always wanted to write a book. I thought it would be fiction. No, I'm not that kind of writer, but I did want to have a book. I don't know how I decided this is the time. I think one of the factors was it was slow. And so I had time on my hands. It took me 15 months to write that book, but I did it. And I got help. I talked to other people who were doing it. I read books on it. You just go out and do it. There's so many different ways. People have said you can take an index card and every day just write some ideas, and in a year you'll have all of these ideas. Or bring a recorder with you and talk as ideas come to you. There are so many different ways to write a book, but
Which
it's when you want to. And here's the thing I would say to people, it's a calling card. It is a great credential, but don't look to make money on it. There are some people who do, and those are the ones a lot of times who are self-published, who really are super salespeople. But most of us are not going to make big money on the book. The book is a calling card. It's a great marketing tool.
is it outbound or inbound marketing, or a little bit of both when you have a book, as far as people finding you and you going out to people?
It's probably both. It depends on what you want to do. I actually was lucky when I had my publisher, I got 3 months of PR, and that makes such a difference. When you have a PR firm today, it's really hard to get that. But I was in certain magazines and news articles, and I did some TV. So that all helps. It's all part of the mix. The good thing about online is it has a long shelf life. So if I had to choose between television or print, I would do print because you can just it lives forever. In I think it was 2007, I was quoted in the New York Times about an article on pitching, and that article brought me business. I would get calls. How'd you hear from me? Oh, New York Times. And I'm telling you, it was one quote. Now, that was a long time ago. I'm not getting business from that anymore, but it was nice when it was happening. So, wherever you can get publicity, do it. Podcasts are another way because then you can put that all out on social media. When I started, there was no social media. So that was
Mm.
another learning curve. But there use every kind of venue that you can, but especially where do your people hang out? And that's where you want to be promoting.
How do you know who your people are? Is it how they respond to your big idea? Is it you just test a bunch of audiences and see what the reaction is? How do you find your people, your groups? Because there's so many out there, and it could take so long to go through a lot of them.
It's a journey, and it was very hard for me. I was always a generalist, and my topic is very broad, so anybody can benefit. And I have to say, my book has been read in colleges as a text, and it's been read in the C-suite. So that's how broad it is. But
Wow.
what I discovered is, and if I had known this earlier, that would have been helpful. The narrower you are, the better. And it seems counterintuitive. But when you have a group of people and you know them and their problems and they know you, it's going to be easier to build that business. So, how do you find out who that is? Well, first of all, who do you enjoy working with?
Mm.
That's the first thing. What lights you up? Uh, where are you getting most of your requests? Who's responding to you? So it's both ways.
How do you know when to get
Basically,
representation? What does that road look like?
representation, do you mean like a speakers bureau?
It could be a speakers bureau. It could be somebody that you hire. I mean, a virtual assistant to go out and do that. Up to definitely, without a doubt, a speakers bureau or connections to corporate meeting planners. But is that something that everyone should aspire to, or how do you get started leveling up to have representation so people are finding your gigs and helping share your big idea with other people for you?
Like anything, it's a process. So when you are able to delegate the things that you don't like to do or don't have the time to do, that's the time to hire someone. And there are different ways you can do that. There's Fiverr. Is there, I think not Unsplash, there's another one. I forgot the name of it, but they're
Mhm.
all, you may know it. But there are different groups where you can hire someone for a project. And then at a certain point, I did have an assistant who was an employee for a few years. I now do the subcontracting route. And as far as a speakers bureau, that's hard. That's like an actor who needs an agent, but they don't want to work with you until you have a certain reputation. So again, go where they hang out. You can go and offer to do a free program for them so they can see you in action. But if you just blindly send a video, it probably won't even be watched. So you're better off. First of all, you need to be a certain level because bureaus make a commission. So they want people who are charging a lot more money. And so you can wait until you get to that level, or you can try to get to know them on a personal level and build that relationship that way. So where would you find them? National Speakers Association might be a place. Meeting Professionals International, MPI, is a place. So think about where those people who can hire you are living, or what do they read, where do they go, and that's where you start to network.
I forgot to ask, on your journey to sharing your big idea, what came first, or was it tandem, the speaking or the consulting?
Speaking, definitely. I did mostly training. In fact, I was doing stand-up training even at the Board of Education, because I would do teacher education. So I would do a seminar workshop on a particular aspect of speech pathology. I also had a teaching gig. I worked at a college twice, actually. One was St. Joseph's, the other was NYU, New York University. So that's stand-up training. I was honing my skills that way. That was paid speaking. And then little by little, you just develop it. It grows. You
So
determine where you want to go, and then you make a plan.
talk a little bit more about that with the plan.
Well, rather than waiting for the phone to ring, which it won't, you decide, well, here are the people that I want to work with. Where can I find them? So let's say some people come out of an industry like real estate and they say, I want to be a speaker. Well, guess what? That's the perfect audience for you because you have credibility. I have a friend who was a lawyer at one point, and now he's a speaker. And I said to him, I would target law firms. You have instant credibility. It's going to be a much easier sell. You're going to speak their language. Doesn't mean you have to be exclusive, but it's a good way to get started. So where are you in terms of your background, your credibility, and the type of people you like, and then make a plan to do that. So what did he do? He started listing all the law firms and speaking at the Bar Association. You can go and look at their publications, see if you can write an article or be interviewed. All of that is helpful.
With everything you've done, as far as big ideas or next steps, what's next for you? What are your plans moving ahead?
I would like to write another book. I haven't decided what that is, but that's on the horizon. That's a plan that I have. And then what recently happened, which was exciting, my book, Knockout Presentations, was on the billboard at Times Square on February 29th, leap year day. So that was very exciting. So getting more publicity for that as well. And just getting out there and speaking more. I do a combination of speaking training and coaching. So definitely I want to write another book before it's all over and get out there and speak more.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. If you were to hone down a message and tell somebody, if you have this big idea that you want to share, and it could be multiple answers or just one to reinforce or something you haven't mentioned yet, if you're going to say, just get started with this one thing, what would you tell them to do? I mean, if nothing else, at least do this. What would you say to them?
Do what's driving you. What do you really love? And don't worry that you don't know how to do it. Focus on the what and the why, not on the how. That's what really holds you back. When you get started on how do I do this? I don't know anybody. That's what keeps you frozen. So just put one foot forward. What do I want? And why is this so important? Be able to talk about the why, and that will get the momentum going. But where's your passion? What lights you up? Don't let yourself be affected by your head. Go by your heart, meaning I'm joyful, I'm excited, I love doing that. Okay, let's figure out a way that you can do it.
And if people want to find you online, where's the best place to go?
My website, DiResta.com. That's D as in David, I-R-E, S as in Sam, T as in Thomas, A.com.
Thank you so much for the time, Diane. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. And also, people can visit my YouTube channel. I have about 200 videos on there too. It's youtube.com/Diane DiResta.
Excellent. Thank you again. We really appreciate the time.
Thank you.
And see.